Hey guys, welcome back to Winter Wolf's Den. Winter Wolf here today, flying solo. Gonna rock out with a Picard Season 3, kind of an intro review. They've only got 2 episodes out so far, with new episodes coming out on Thursday. If you follow the channel for a little bit, you know I've been on a little bit of a rampage in the past with, Star Trek, Doctor Who, Star Wars, things like that. I find that these current iterations of these shows really don't play nice with my classic sensibilities that some of these IPs have had in the past in terms of their quality, their writing level, just their creativity, their thought-provoking nature, being that they're all kind of like sci-fi or sci-fi-tainment kind of products. I've not really been a fan of most of what modern Trek has had to offer, after about Star Trek 09, when I didn't really understand a lot of how deconstructing these franchises would wind up, 10 years later. So I think Star Trek Discovery, definitely not my cup of tea. The animated stuff that they're coming out with, also not really my cup of tea either. I can't stomach some of the lowbrow stuff that they try and do with that show. So it's not really for me. It's got one of the absolute worst Mary Sue characters on the cast in Trek or IP history. I can't get behind that. And then, so when we get to Picard, it's basically for 2 seasons been one bit of contention after the other in terms of underwhelming plot or performances, sloppy writing, and overabundance, over-reliance on action sequences and things that don't really hit like TNG or DS9. That's my heyday for Trek. That doesn't hit like those kind of things. And maybe one of the worst offenders for me in the Picard series run is, admittedly, after being kind of excited when they announced they were going to do a Picard show, I think we all kind of figured we were going to get that kind of show where it's kind of like, hey, we're going to get Picard back in the captain's chair. He's going to get the old team back together, and they're going to go off on one last ride. I think a lot of fans would have been down for that. What we got was the Admiral Picard apology tour, because somehow every bad thing that happened in the world, post the last time we've seen that particular character in action is all his fault. So he's apologizing left, right, and sideways to people that have gripes with him over things that he did do or didn't do or was supposed to do, but none of it really added up to making any coherent sense other than it was just an opportunity for personal politics and agenda to be injected into a traditionally strong male character to break him down, deconstruct him, and just make him kind of grovel for the sake of groveling, despite the fact that multiple generations of men, women, and everything in between found the character aspirational, inspirational, and kind of a joy to watch. But I finally bit the bullet and checked out Picard Season 3, after very quite happily getting off the Trek Discovery train very early on, like I said, and then I managed to avoid Picard Season 1 and Season 2 like an agent dodging bullets in the Matrix after hearing the Starfleet Admiral drop an F-bomb that hit with about the force of a runaway cringe train. I'll admit it though, the new blood that they brought on board, that they infused into the IP, it colored me intrigued because they kind of stated in a roundabout way that they wanted a return to form, that they wanted to get Trek back on track, that they wanted to boldly go back to where no one had gone before with some of these new shows and kind of rejuvenate and resurrect the once vaunted franchise. So I got a little excited, so I'm not gonna lie. I was intrigued by hearing and reading some of these reports online about the new showrunner they were bringing in and what his intentions were. Now, on the surface, Picard Season 3 appears to be what a sizable portion of fans wanted from the show to begin with. We had a fan-favorite legendary captain coming out of a bored but well-deserved retirement for one last adventure that required him to convince his old crew to mount up one final time. The promos for Episode 1 and 2 revealed several similar faces. The promos for Episode 1 and 2 revealed several familiar faces. The theme songs tugged on the heartstrings. Everything seemed wrapped up tighter than a LaForge rigged confinement beam. In jokes. You gotta love them. But is this real Trek? Is it truly a series that's going to deliver on its promise to hand over well-written, thought-provoking sci-fi that doesn't pander politically, or seek to tear down the past to build a more equitable future atop the ashes of what came before in one of the world's most endearing fictional worlds? So far, it's looking like a bit of both. So far, I'm not blown away. Picard Season 3 isn't offensive to Star Trek's legacy like Discovery or Picard's own first 2 seasons, but there's something kinda off. Let me explain after a series synopsis. I think that'll help. Now, after receiving a coded message on his old comm badge, nostalgia point, Picard comes face to face with the graven image of a wounded Dr. Beverly Crusher, from whom he's been estranged for 20 years for reasons yet unknown. She implores him for help and warns him to trust no one before the message ominously cuts out. Now up against the clock, Admiral Picard must finally get the old band back together and reach their injured colleague before it's too late. Oh, and there's yet another shadowy Starfleet conspiracy and a technologically superior enemy to contend with. And that's kind of that similarity numero uno with, I think, kind of the less inspired aspects of Trek in the post-JJ Trek, 2009 era. Like, we've seen this done before. Now, it's an intriguing setup that moves fast, makes its point, and then moves right along to the next part of the plot. I'm torn here because while I'm interested, because the audience knows more than Picard does at this point, I have massive reservations that this season, while apparently better than season 1 and 2, according to some online sources that I kind of trust, it's going to wind up more like Star Trek 09, like I said, than I'd like it to. When I heard Picard Season 3 had a showrunner that wanted to restore Trek's proper standing within pop culture, I'd hope what that meant specifically was a return to a more episode of the week, crisis of the week style show, and not another season-long narrative broken up into chapters. Picard could have featured a blended crew populated by senior members of the old TNG crew, bringing on board a younger set eager to learn from their heroes, but also still being free to kind of, forge destinies of their own outside of their hero's shadows. That could have been cool. And maybe that wouldn't have worked for a show that's functionally a send-off for an established crew, but at the end of the day, it's an idea that probably should have been explored. But I digress. Through 2 episodes, we get 2 parallel plots, which is kind of typical to how New Trek has been working. They do the interwoven kind of vignette here, and then meet at the end kind of thing. We get Picard on his mission to collect party members and gear for his last raid, and Picard series original character Raffi working deep cover for a mysterious handler within Starfleet intelligence to track down a plot involving experimental WMDs. Yawn. And here's where the show sort of fails itself. Generally speaking, the Picard plot is not bad. It's well written, tight, moves along like you'd expect the typical Star Trek episode to flow. He teams up early with Riker, and to be honest, Jonathan Frakes kind of carries things. He conjures Will Riker back into existence with relative ease, and his quips and jokes land more often than not. You either like the smarmy, charmy, kind of cheesy jokes, or you don't. I'm a big Riker fan, so I'm down to see Frakes back doing the role. We get hints of drama on the Riker family front that hopefully have sufficient payoff later when Marina Sirtis' character, Counselor Troy, is brought back on board. The segment also features the ever-gorgeous Jerry Ryan, a 7 of 9, now second in command of the ship Titan that Picard needs to borrow, as well as Lieutenant Geordi LaForge's daughter, Sydney, filling in at the helm, also played by LeVar Burton's real-life daughter. We also meet Picard's foil, Captain Liam Shaw, a fastidious, by-the-book captain with less than zero regard for Picard and Riker's living legend status. The plot thickens here quickly and in a couple of ways that I'll gripe about later. But it moves itself along, and Picard and Riker find themselves in the familiar position, ultimately, of staring down a superior vessel with an hour to choose between giving up one of their own to the aggressor's demands or doing what made them famous in the first place. And you can probably guess how that goes down at the end of episode 2. Spoiler alert, it goes down with Picard saying, "Engage," which was kind of cool. The other plot that I mentioned features Raffi, like I said, coping with her past addiction issues as she tries to run down leads on a mysterious figure known as the Red Lady. Experimental weapons have been lifted from the DOESN Institute. Jesus Christ, that place needs better security. And are likely seconds away from being transferred to the wrong hands. We get hints of the fallout stemming from her compromises, mistakes, and previous choices. And then disaster strikes. The weapon is deployed on a Starfleet recruitment center, and several hundred lives are lost. Raffi is shut out by her handler, who orders her to stand down. She refuses, of course, opting to go through the investigation alone. One thing leads to another, and Raffi finds herself incapacitated by the Ferengi gangster she was trying to run down for additional leads. Lo and behold, Worf shows up and, demolishes the gang, in short order revealing himself to be Raffi's handler before getting her the F out of Dodge. I'll say here, one of the more entertaining parts of the show was seeing Michael Dorn do his thing. Worf always had this unique fighting style where it was fluid, but it was also kind of angular, like it was just one move after the other, in almost like a triangular kind of way, but it flowed well. So I don't know if he did the stunt work for that, given he's getting up there in years as well. But it looked good, and it was nice to see him back. It was good to see the old hack and slash from the Klingon. I like that. But here's where I get torn when I'm talking about the total picture of the show. I like the setup to both plot lines. I've seen both of them before in TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager. There's nothing really original here. But with the right tweaks, decent performances and solid writing, I'm down to revisit this world and follow these characters. Not doing so, disrespect to, what's happened in Picard 1 and 2 and Discovery that I already mentioned. I feel like if they're going to try and make amends here, if the writers are trying to make amends or the IP is trying to make amends, I'm down to let it happen for as long as it's entertaining. And I think sitting it out because you've seen it before, like on a general level, would be like saying you wouldn't go back to your favorite team's like home game, or you wouldn't want to see your favorite band perform more than once on tour. We've seen that there are no new stories. We have original ideas and archetypes. Everybody puts a little spin on it, and then we go from there. So if you're kind of sold on the fiction, you're sold on kind of reconsuming the same things in new and interesting ways with different pinches of this, different dashes of that, and hopefully somebody comes up with a new creative spin on some things. And they have an opportunity here for that. The problem is I'm not sure the writing will wind up being up to the challenge. With old Trek, original series through Enterprise, I always felt like it's hard to describe. Like there was a feel. You felt like you were an observer in another time and a place. Dialogue in particular has always been something that, while not up like a Shakespearean level of quality, just in terms of sentence structure and grammar and all that kind of stuff, it always felt like polished, formal, kind of evolved. There wasn't a lot of slang being thrown around by the main cast. It was always kind of, if the crew was off-world and talking with members of another species or something like that, they might have had slang, especially if they weren't as evolved as the Federation was at that time period, or if they were demonstrated as being like lower brow. You get the slang from them, but it was never part of the crew. It was all very military, very formal, almost kind of idealized military speak, especially as the command structure worked together and how they addressed Commander Riker, how they addressed Captain Picard. And you could see it at the next level too. Whenever there was an admiral that would visit, the Enterprise, or if Picard had to make like a long distance subspace call out to, Starfleet headquarters and got an admiral at the other end, there wasn't a whole lot of bicker banter. There was a very stratified, we know who's in command here, and you treat the next guy up or the next woman up, with the respect that's due their rank. And I feel like New Trek gets that wrong more often than not, and it kind of stands out. It stands out here too. You just don't get that same consistency with the dialogue or the tech jargon that they kind of break out. So what this feels like to me so far is another one of the Next Generation feature films at best, and that's probably not good enough for a series. It feels like Trek here still desperately wants to be an action franchise with mass market appeal instead of being first and foremost interesting science fiction. And I kind of think that at this point, JJ Trek has proven that the more it becomes one lens-flared action sequence after another, the more incomprehensibly unrecognizable a Star Trek it becomes. But, you guys be the judge. There's other things that feel like conceptual holdovers from the earlier seasons that are also hard to swallow. First and foremost, Picard still comes across as a weak-willed, woe-is-me, empty shell of his former greatness. And I get it. Patrick Stewart's getting up there. He's like 130, I think. That's Picard's 130. He's a robot. Patrick Stewart is almost like 90 or whichever. But he's still getting up there. And my man, if you can't do the job, you don't take the job. There's a reason pro athletes retire. And maybe actors need to start doing the same. So far through 2 episodes, Picard doesn't really execute any out-of-the-box creative thinking, critical problem-solving. He doesn't bring the imposing presence that he used to have. And I'm not willing to attribute that all to his just being up there in advanced age now. He also doesn't have any of his trademark diplomatic skills on display. There's no passion in this character at all that we've seen so far through 2 episodes, except for one blink at the end of episode 2 where I kind of caught myself nodding my head like, all right, that's Picard. But I'm going to need you to drum that up for the entire run of the show, except for the odd moment of crisis as it comes through. Because at the end of the day, you're still a Starfleet admiral, retired or not. You're built of tougher metal than I think current day writers know how to write in these kind of characters, because they're used to writing softer characters that literally express every emotion that they have, at all times in front of any audience, with no sense of decorum or respect for the position or the ranks or the audience. I think that it's still kind of lacking here in that kind of way. And what's worse too, the rest of the world continues to treat him like a has-been. It's tough to watch. And maybe the hardest part was watching Picard kind of like flop his head down in his hands and kind of cradle his head at the slightest hint of trouble and resistance that came up when they started to execute their plan to get to Beverly. It's not Picard. It's still Robo Picard from the past 2 seasons, and it looks like someone still forgot to install the testosterone update patch. So it's kind of lacking on that front. You know, the tonal wrongness is present in the Raffi plot too. It just doesn't feel like Trek. It feels very present day, from the slang and shoddy dialogue right down to the Blade Runner cyberpunk inspired world that she's part of, with like the weird fashion and hairstyles, the same typical generic techno electronica style music, the neon lights. I get it, she's in the seedy underbelly, but literally, does every seedy underbelly everywhere in the known universe look and sound the same? Like, they need to shake that up. It's tired. You know, it's not remotely new. It's not remotely thought-provoking. It's not for me. You know, and because she's not one of the original team, I just don't care that she's the one executing the investigation. Now, if it were Worf that were deep cover, that'd be a different story. You know, hell, they even could have had him do the investigating as kind of like a fish out of water kind of detective, you know, being that he's Klingon and probably wouldn't go in with the softest approach to being undercover. He could have just bashed some skulls along the way as he's, you know, getting answers to who stole the weapons and what's going on. If only. But we didn't get that. We got Raffi doing a thing. And it's not a knock against the actor. She's probably doing the best she can with what they give her, but they legit give her the shittiest constructed dialogue that I think I've ever seen, which again includes like expletives that are right out of like present day 2020s Earth. So it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like Trek. It doesn't feel like Trek. And that's always been my complaint with the new stuff that's coming out. It doesn't remind me enough of the old school stuff, while even just bringing new, you know, stuff to the table to do. But I'll say this to wrap up and head out. There's likely enough here to keep me watching. And if they manage to combine my nostalgia for TNG, DS9, and Voyager, and using old tech and some of the musical cues was a great start to that, and they treat the characters with proper respect down the road, if they get most of them right, you know, if we get LaForge and he's not some chump, and if we get, you know, Brent Spiner back as Lore, because remember, Data is still somehow dead in this world, even though we've managed to put Picard's essence or soul in a new old man body, which still doesn't make any sense. I mean, hopefully we get an actual Data appearance and not just Brent Spiner as Lore. That would kind of suck. Yeah, I'd like to see that. I mean, hopefully they have some surprises planned. Like if they could bring back Barclay, that'd be kind of cool. I'd like to see some tie-ins to Deep Space Nine. I think that entire crew and those concepts criminally underrepresented, you know, in current day Trek. I'd love to see some of that stuff come back. You know, where they can get folks that are still around. I understand some of those actors are no longer with us. The actor that plays Odo passed a few years ago, if I remember right. But, you know, Avery's out there still. So, I mean, bring him in. I'd love to see some Sisko, but I think he's out of Hollywood. So, I mean, maybe I can't get Deep Space Nine, but still, I'd call it a success if they get the next generation characters right, and they manage to do some torch passing to bring some new folks in. That'd be great. Yeah, it might not be the full-on return to Star Trek glory I wanted, but after the ringer this franchise has been through, was it really a fair expectation that season 3 of a show that got off to mostly a shaky start with a good portion of fans, was that a fair expectation for us to have? Probably not. They're going to need time to be able to kind of reinvigorate themselves, kind of course correct, and just kind of stay true. Leave all the politics, the present day politics, leave them out. If you're going to write politics into some of your subplots, which Trek has always had, as many people always point out, you have to do it with some subtlety and some nuance. You have to do it with like a multi-positional familiarity with the issue you're trying to write about. You can't just write your personal perspective into the show. That's never how Trek worked. It always had a balance of representation from the sides of a problem being talked about, and then the characters work through stuff, and then you work through it with them. That's good Trek. That's how it works. It's not phaser blast after, you know, warp 10, shootout, space dog fight, and then that's it. There needs to be more. It needs to hit at some more grounded sci-fi kind of concepts where the problems are solved with, even though it's completely fake, it's out of the box thinking that like you can see the characters coming up with because they've been established as being, like LaForge or like O'Brien, that they have an understanding of the world they live in. They understand their fake physics. So they're able to, be creative on the fly and just give you cool stuff to wrap your head around. And it doesn't need to be things that break the world like, transwarp beaming or whatever the hell happened in Trek 09, where now you can beam from one ship to another ship at warp 9 or some nonsense. Like, no, just be cool with the tech. Give me stuff to think about. Give me moral situations to think about on like a massive 30,000 foot down look at, you know, your political stuff, and I'll be happy with it. So I don't know, guys. I'll watch more Picard this week. I'll probably do a total series review at the end. But I wanted to get this one out here because I did enjoy the first 2 episodes, and it's nice to enjoy stuff from time to time. So let me know what you guys think below. Are you digging Picard season 3? Have you shut it off altogether because you're just not down with new Trek, or are you a diehard? Have you been there through all the new Trek, right through Discovery, right up till now? Let me know. I'll see you guys in the next one.